Bonjour, buenos dias, good morning, good afternoon for everyone coming from everywhere. I can see as you are entering in the meeting. My name is Loïc Roche. I am the head of the training department of IFCU, and today we are going to present to you two programs we are proposing to the members of the federation that will take place, we hope, next September in Rome. The two programs are dealing with leadership and quality assurance in Catholic universities. It is a long time we are running these two programs with John Davis and David Locke, who are present here and who will present them to you since 2012. The first program has been organized by IFCU in the topic of leadership in Catholic universities. It was a full program that took place in all the continents. And now we are, and since that time, we are running each year a new program on leading Catholic universities. So quality assurance is quite new as a program for IFCU. It has been organized in 2019 for the first time, and we decided to join the two programs together at the same place and in September, but they are still separate, and everyone can choose to come for the QA program or the leading Catholic universities program. Now I will let John Davis talk, and I wish you a warm welcome on behalf of IFCU. Thank you very much. John, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Good day, colleagues. I think day is probably the best description to use since we're from different time zones. But it's very nice to have the opportunity to talk with you about the two programs which Loïc has described. David, if you'd like to sort of move us on for the next slide.
For some reason, it's not moving, but let's try this. There we are.
Very good. Right. Well, we've in the time we've got available, we thought probably what we would do is to follow this approach. First of all, to say a few words about what we conceive to be the needs for systematic leadership development in the contemporary Catholic University. Then say a little bit about our approach to running these programs with you, which I think is a little bit different from the traditional mechanisms, I think, which are often used. Then we'll say a little bit about the Leading Catholic Universities program, which is mainly designed for rectors and vice-rectors, deans, directors of administration, and then on to the next program, which is quality assurance, which is principally for rectors, vice-rectors responsible for quality, directors of quality assurance, and other people of that type. And then we'll summarize briefly and give you the chance to, I think, ask us anything which you haven't got a response to in the preceding discussion. So that's roughly how we'll try and proceed. So the first section, I think, is saying why are we concerned we're trying to run this program anyway, and as was mentioned, we've been doing it for the last 7 or 8 years. Well, the first thing I think which occurred to IFCU and ourselves, the academic team, is that there's a whole lot of very big issues now confronting higher education institutions and Catholic institutions in particular. Current issues and future issues which are on the boil, as it were, which leaders have got to develop relevant and purposive strategies and approaches. Now, this is a list, I think, which is pretty well interminable, but we've obviously got a whole lot of pressures and problems for Catholic universities who are operating in very much secular societies. What should be their role in terms of propagating Catholic higher education in secular societies? And there's a great deal of discussion to be had around there. We usually find, of course, that Catholic universities, second, have got their position, of course, within national systems, but as well as being private Catholic universities in their own right. So there's some sort of ambiguity, I think, in the relationship which we do have in Catholic universities with the various government agencies, ministries, and so forth, commissions, in terms of what our status is, how we are financed, how we are recognized, how we interface with government in terms of quality assurance and various things of that type. It's clear, of course, thirdly, that the modern university has got a great variety of stakeholders with all sorts of different demands on universities, not just students of a traditional type, but very much non-traditional students. We've obviously got different demands produced on us by the onset of the pandemic. And this, of course, has obviously changed quite dramatically, how we interact with students of different types. But we've also got stakeholders like the church, stakeholders like government, business, industry, non-governmental organizations, charitable organizations, and so on and so forth. And some of these stakeholders are local, some of them are regional, some of them are international. And consequently, of course, it's much more complex business running a university when you've got conflicting demands, different sort of demands, different behaviors from these groups. And of course, we do at the moment have variable student enrollment patterns as well. COVID, I think, has produced difficulties in terms of sustaining student numbers. We've got different demographic situations in different countries as well. There's a growing tendency, of course, now to look at off-campus provision as well as on-campus provision. There's a great deal of diversity in the student population. And this does, of course, raise for us all sorts of questions as to how we, as Catholic universities, ought to respond to these things. And then if you go on to the next slide, David, inevitably, of course, because of the huge expansion in higher education, we've got large numbers of higher education institutions. And where this happens, there's clearly competition, both between Catholic universities and Catholic universities and pontificals, and Catholic universities and state universities as well. And this, of course, the question of competition raises the point, what is our position, within a very complex system? What do we do which is better than other people do and therefore can attract the business which we clearly need? And it's quite clear, of course, that a lot of Catholic universities these days may be in some financial difficulty because of the student flows, which may be decreasing, and therefore, of course, a question of financial sustainability going into the future. And, of course, the question is how sustainable, how vibrant are our programs these days as well. So there's a question of financial sustainability, academic sustainability, the need to regenerate our programs, and so forth. Then we've got societal change challenges, of course, demanding international attention, which you will undoubtedly be familiar with. Climate change, COVID, social deprivation, all sorts of ethical questions in society, of course. And the question for Catholic universities is, how do we respond to these? Do we change the nature of our research? Do we change the nature of our programs? And of course, it's quite clear that the Catholic Church itself and Pope Francis has got various very clear ideas on how we should react And not all universities, of course, have got to grips with what the reactions probably ought to be. So the question is here, I think, how does the Catholic University seek to lead thought in the societies in which it is operating? How does it seek to reinvent itself in terms of education and research as well? And the next point is an interesting one, because what we often find, of course, is some Catholic institutions are very, very big indeed. Others are actually quite small. And if they are quite small, are they more vulnerable? And if they are more vulnerable, we come back to the question of survival and sustainability as well. And here, of course, we've got the problem of economies of scale and how we overcome that. And it's no coincidence, I think, that we've seen a lot of Catholic universities getting involved in mergers and affiliations and partnerships in order to try and get around these particular problems. And then the last but one point, a tendency in some institutions for shortcomings in professional leadership at various levels. People often become rectors or vice-rectors without having really any systematic preparation for these sort of jobs. And they get plunged into very difficult situations where they're not really prepared in terms of knowledge of how one manages an institution to be able to sort of see their way through. And of course, we do tend to find various unfavorable internal cultures in these institutions as well, which tend to be resistant to change. So one of the things I think which we're very keen on in our programs is helping managers, helping leaders, helping rectors and so on to manage change through what are very unfavorable circumstances. And this does mean, therefore, that if we put all these things together, what we tend to find is leaders needing all sorts of assistance to confront these issues. Assistance like helping understand precisely what these problems are all about, helping to understand what the alternative ways of dealing with these options are, helping them to figure out what good practice may be in terms of resolving these things, and particularly, of course, helping them to manage their way through various complex cultures, various complex situations in that way, which involves, of course, motivating the institution to be able to survive and to become proactive. So we could talk for hours on all this stuff, and of course, this is what the programs are partly all about anyway. But having said all that we have, our approach, therefore, is on the following lines. We very much run in this program, not as a general leadership program at all. It's one which is a program specifically about the identity and characteristics of the Catholic University per se. What should be, what might be its future values and philosophy? How might its intellectual traditions need to evolve over time? How is the Catholic identity made manifest, for example, in structures and processes? How are we coping with the expectations, for example, which Pope Francis is laying on us in various encyclicals like Laudato Si, Veritatis Gaudium, and so on and so forth. And this is apparent, of course, in how we conceive of our future education and research. So we're talking, I think, very much about generic issues in management and leadership, but in the particular context of the Catholic University. We are certainly informed, I think, by good practices in universities elsewhere. And we will be feeding into this various consultancy activities, various research, which we have been doing from time to time over the last 20 or so years in Catholic institutions. But when we come on to the way in which the programs will actually run, I think it's important to say that we start these programs where you are as participants. We don't come with a whole big curriculum which we just deliver. We try and figure out what are the issues which you have got in your own institutions. And we can then sort of bring into bear various ideas, various pieces of literature, various good practice to suit the problems which you yourselves have identified. So I think we're very much concerned, therefore, with drawing on your own experiences and your expertise as a group. So the group is as important as a resource as we are as faculty members. And what we do in advance of us meeting is to ask you to do some analyses of particular issues in your own institutions. David will talk about this later on in terms of the so-called SWOT analyses, where we ask you to do an analysis of the SWOT, of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats confronted in your own universities and what are the problems you have. We then work very much with you as individuals and in groups to try and figure out what concrete approaches to the issues defined should be developed. And we help you develop specific action plans which you can use back home in terms of achieving change. So the whole point is, of course, our programs are very much action-oriented programs, very much action-oriented programs. They are strategic because they're about the long-term evolution of your institutions, and they are, of course, international and comparative because we're using good practice derived from elsewhere. So our programs, I think, are a bit different from what you might usually find, in that it's not just a string of lectures. It's very much more interactive. It's very much starting where you are. It's very much concerned with not only helping you increase in knowledge and understanding, but helping you do things when you get back. So it's much more competency-based than most of the other programs which you'd find. And consequently, of course, the beneficiaries are not only yourselves, but your institutions as well. So that's a sort of general overview, if you like, of our style as IFCU faculty for these programs. So what we'd like to do now, I think, is to take each of the two programs in turn and begin to unpack these in terms of how they operate. And obviously, what we'd very much like is that we motivate you to wish to come and join us on these programs in September as well, because they are really very, very enjoyable experiences. They do create lasting friendships and so on. So can I hand over to David at this point to lead us into leading Catholic universities in the 21st century, which is from the 19th to the 24th of September coming. David.
Thank you very much indeed, John. My name's David Locke. I used to be International Director of the Leadership Foundation for Higher Education in the United Kingdom. Before that, I was a rector. I set up the British University in Dubai, and I was administrative head of a couple of universities in the UK, one old one and one new one. And I've worked with John from the very start of this project. And one of the great things is that John is a distinguished academic. He's a higher education leader. He's been a pro-vice chancellor and so on. And we come at the various issues from those two different perspectives. And I think that's one of the things which participants in previous programs have appreciated from working with us. Now, building on everything that John has said generally, I'm going to say a word about the program Leading Catholic Universities in the 21st Century. What's it for? Well, a large part of it is to help participants understand the complexity of the issues. But it's not just a oh, doom and gloom, or oh, how complex this is. The approach which we take is looking for the opportunities which these complexities offer. And then having done that, what we work with the group to do is develop relevant approaches to those problems in a way that ideally enables their institutions to thrive. Although in some cases, institutions are concerned about survival, and we work on that too. But there's an added dimension. All of the programs which we have run have been international. And as John said, we try to incorporate the experience brought by all members of the group. So it's a very international occasion, and it's an international occasion which doesn't stop at the end of the program, because I've had the privilege of meeting up with various members of the 5 cohorts of this program, which we've now run several years on, and they're still working with each other, they're still supporting each other, and so on. What does the program comprise? Well, we've listed the main strands of content on this slide. A lot of it is about strategy and strategic development, but that's all done in the context of the Catholic identity. And we have Father Michael Holman, former Father Jesuit in the United Kingdom, as part of our team. He used to be a principal of the University of London College in his own right, and he's very much a member of our team. We look at how Catholic universities are managed, or how they might be managed better, and the challenges that come up from that. And as John said, we don't have a fixed program that we go through. The documents that you submit on deciding to join the program are the documents which determine what we actually focus on. And that way, we hope that it will best meet your needs. We do look, though, at the role of the rector and senior leadership teams. And again, we try to share experience of different cultures, different sort of institutions, what works where. John mentions that we have a lot of experience of working with Catholic universities. We do. I've spent a lot of time working in the Middle East with universities there. And several years ago now, John and I used to travel to various bits of the world to assist with the development of education systems, sometimes wearing flak jackets and under armed escorts, as we were in Iraq when we were working with the people there. And we'll try and bring that experience where it's relevant into our program, although I do assure you that flak jackets are not necessary for this program. Then we'll look at personal effectiveness. And it doesn't matter how long we've been leading anything, we can always be better at it. And we'll have a look at the elements of that. And I'd just like to add at this point that we welcome rectors, we welcome senior leaders, we welcome senior administrators, but we also welcome people for whom those roles will be their next role. And I think, we've been pleased to work with all of our participants, but some of them who've joined because they are taking up a new role, I think have gained a huge amount from the program. And then the last item on that slide, open box sessions, that's nothing about magic at all. That is about those things that you tell us you want to focus on. And we might split the program into 3 or 4 different bits and run parallel streams so that we can provide as much as possible of what it is you need. How do we help you to learn? Well, we do some lectures. We do invite guest speakers. You saw a picture of the Cardinal earlier on. I'll talk about SWAT groups in a minute. Between John and myself and the other members of the team, we have a fair few case studies which we can use if that's relevant. And during the week, we go on visits. So in the picture there, you have a group which visited the congregation for a very interesting afternoon with them. Reflection is an important part of the program. So the spaces in the evenings, the spaces at meal times and so on, they're deliberately there so that you can think about what it means and you can network informally and share that with your colleagues. We're open in the way we work the group, but we do ask people to be confidential when they're outside the program in how they use the information which they've received. There are opportunities throughout the week to work one-on-one, or you may discover that John has particular experience of something which you are battling with at the moment. And there's absolutely no reason why a meeting can't be arranged and you can sit down and talk through it with John. And also what's happened on previous programs is that some participants have started a course of action. And then they've said to one of us, look, would you continue to work with me on this? Can I send you the plans? Will you comment on this and so on? And we've been very happy to do that. And for the most part, we just do it. If, as in a couple of cases, it's involved a significant consultancy, we may need to talk about a fee for that, but certainly the first few approaches are without charge. I mentioned I'd come back to SWAT groups. SWAT, as John has said, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And that's a significant part of the work which you do before the program. Now, the groups are small. We use an action learning methodology. In other words, we recognize we don't know the answers, but we recognize that there's a lot of experience in the 4 or 6 people that are sitting around on the group. We focus on the issues which you raise in your SWATs, and you select what it is that you want to talk about from your institution. Now, the most fruitful use is if you come with a project that you want to launch and you share with the group your issues around that project, your challenges and so on. And then we work on that. And during the week, we spend probably a third of the time in SWAT groups. And each of you will have one or maybe more sessions which are focused on your needs. One of the academic team will facilitate the group. Some of you may be familiar with the term co-consultancy, and that's an approach which we use, but we certainly encourage the sharing of experience. And those groups are aimed towards the development of action plans, which you can then go back to your institution and implement. And as I said, we are very happy to follow up, and we're very happy for you to approach us as you go through the journey. So, what might you get out of coming on the Leading Catholic Universities programme? Well, I think it's useful to see this in under three headings. Firstly, you as an individual. Now, we know that leadership is a very lonely place. You can't always talk with people in your institution about what you want to do. And sometimes, even the most confident of us may lack confidence to take some of the bolder decisions and actions which we need to take forward. And this programme, based on previous feedback, gives participants confidence to develop and pursue strategic initiative. We help you to develop your skills, understanding of processes, and so on. And you will absolutely certainly come away with a network of people who will support you in the future. The second beneficiary is your institution and projects that your institution might develop. Now, over the years, there's a long list of them. I've just picked 3 or 4 here. One colleague had the task of developing a new campus. One colleague was involved in a quite difficult restructuring of his university. There have been all sorts of development plans, some of them around income, some of them around research, and so on. And one which, if you want to ask me when we come to questions, I'll tell you much more about, is a huge project which has come off beautifully about the way in which the university engaged with its community and is now much stronger, much more successful, and so on. And finally, I think the last beneficiary is Catholic higher education globally. Sitting as part of the world's largest network of higher education organizations, internationalization is hugely important. International partnerships to student mobility and so on. And the way we put our faith into practice and share that with the community is very significant. And I think this program helps with all of that. And we've got pretty good evidence that it does. So let me now hand back to John to talk about the quality assurance program.
Thanks very much. Going back to what David mentioned, both the open box sessions and the issues, which come out of the SWATs, which people develop action plans for, a number of them actually do contain various aspects of the development of quality assurance as well. But there are lots of other things which I just mentioned, just to sort of complete the picture. We do spend a lot of time on the first program talking about internationalization, the universities and regional development, teaching and learning strategies. Governance, I think, is quite strong. And increasingly, I think we're finding that interinstitutional partnerships becomes really a very important one as well. And all of these, I think, are not unconnected, of course, with this next one, which is quality assurance. Now, this is a program which is a little bit newer than the leading Catholic universities. And it's one, I think, which has become really quite important, partly because Catholic universities, of course, are located within state systems. And those state systems have usually got quality agencies or accreditation agencies, or whatever it might happen to be, which deal with the secular degrees and secular research, of course, which goes on within those universities. But it's also the case, of course, that Pope Francis is particularly interested, particularly concerned that the quality of institutions generally is pretty good, because they are Catholic universities and they need to have a very good reputation and so forth. Now, one aspect of this, of course, is the Holy See has set up an agency for the evaluation and promotion of quality in ecclesiastical institutions. This looks at ecclesiastical degrees. And we found in the past that a number of the people who come on our programs not only run secular degrees, but they run ecclesiastical degrees as well in so-called pontifical institutes, which may be located within the university. So when we're looking at QA in Catholic universities, there's these 2 dimensions, secular degrees and also ecclesiastical degrees, which of course not all Catholic universities will have. Now, this is a program, I think, which is therefore run in collaboration with AVEPRO, which is the Holy See agency. And they do contribute to the teaching of this. It is very much designed for those with senior responsibility for quality assurance matters. Vice-rectors, certainly, we have had rectors on it as well in the past. Directors of quality assurance, professors who are chairs of quality committees in the universities, quality councils and so forth. And we've also had people from dioceses, bishops' conferences and so on who have a responsibility for quality as well. So it's quality, of course, is a pretty sort of broad area, and I think all of us impinge on it in one way or another. Now, the assumptions and design of the program are very much similar to what David and I talked about previously. But if we look at the objectives and design, David, the particular things I think which you're trying to home in on with this one is to work with participants to help them to consider and evaluate current practices at agency level, the agency which affects them, and institutional levels as well, in the light of changing external conditions and issues in secular society and in the church. And this, of course, is where we get Pope Francis's imperatives coming in. And I think we're looking at both because, of course, they are very much interconnected anyway. So it's important we do get a pretty good idea of what you think are the things which work. What are the things which don't work so well in terms of your own quality assurance practices in institutions at the moment? This is the starting point. And this is where we ask you to do some preliminary work before you come, so you can tell us what works and what doesn't work, and we can work on it from there on. The second thing I think which we're concerned with is to bring you up to date with what AVEPRO is likely to be doing in the next 5 years, because it's now been given by the Pope a global role, whereas it's basically just had a European role as far as things are concerned at the moment. What we are very much concerned, I think, is looking at those two things there and seeing how your own approaches and practices for the development and evolution of quality should now take place. And in this as well, if we identify that there are problems which you are seeing, then we will try and sort of bring examples of how other institutions have resolved those problems, admittedly in different settings, which we can consider in relation to your own institution as well. So like the other programs, we want to help you to formulate priorities for the development of QA in your own institutions. So let's go on to the next one. So in this sense, I think that the content of the program, very briefly, is of these particular lines. We really need to look at the international trends in QA. And these are manifold at the moment. Great debate, for example, as to whether QA ought to be essentially an audit and an accreditation ticking box type of exercise, or whether it's really a stimulus to institutional evolution and developing in a very creative, open-ended sort of way. Really quite fundamental. That's one thing. We've obviously got all sorts of international trends, of course, which are emerging as a result of COVID, which we need to pick up and have a look at. We need to think about the context of QA in Catholic higher education. And this is what AVEPRO is all about. And this is what the Pope's statements are all about as well. So we'll be looking at the encyclicals in a bit more detail, which are, of course, at a fairly high level of abstraction. But we need to get down and see what this meant. And I think we're concerned with looking at cultures for the promotion of quality within the institution. Now, the normal sort of thing, of course, whenever QA gets mentioned in terms of university, is that people will immediately people will immediately dismiss these as being irrelevant and not really worth pursuing at all. So I think from this point of view, we need to look at the whole question of cultures in that particular way. We need to look at cultures, I think, as well, in relation to strategic planning, because our contention, I think, is that this is very much about quality and strategic planning moving together in an interrelated way. If we then go to the next one, we've got international, sorry, beg your pardon.
Just while John is sorting his telephone out, a lot of the pictures in this presentation are taken from the chapel in the Irish College, and the college itself is a perfect location for what we do, plenty of spaces and so on. And there's a lovely environment in which to study, reflect, and to worship as well. John, back to you.
Thanks so much. Apologies for that, colleagues. Apologies, the intrusion of the outside world, which is not helpful. Okay, so what else have we got in terms of the content? Well, we want to look at how we go about institutional reviews, how we go about program reviews, how we go about faculty reviews. Very interesting stuff there. We want to look at quality processes in education, teaching and learning, particularly, of course, nowadays in the context of COVID and so forth. There's a whole area which I think has certainly been neglected in a number of countries, which is quality assurance in terms of research degrees, the PhD, in terms of research generally, and knowledge exchange. Now, the knowledge exchange is rather important because we all do it to a certain extent, but we haven't really got any quality assessment regimes to make sure this is done properly. And the whole thing, of course, is about managing change in the quality domain. How do we go about making sure that our institutions are really up for it in terms of self-evaluation, taking evaluation seriously, working at it, and achieving change? Because unless it's an instrument of change, quality assurance doesn't actually mean very much at all. So that's the context in which we are looking at it. So that being the case, we'll be looking at the organization of quality within institutions as well. Now, the approach to learning, I think, is very much what we talked about previously: lecture presentations, guest contributions, and here we've got the people from AVEPRO who are coming to join us. We've got a rector or two who's coming to join us as well from looking at it from a rector's point of view. Case study, certainly. I mentioned preliminary questionnaire and assignment on your own issues in terms of QA. Again, we'll be deploying support as we did with the program. Reflection, more certainly. One-to-one, more certainly, and a follow-up service as well. And this is something which, again, has been quite interesting in terms of the programs we've run already. How many people have sort of asked us to come and work with them on a particular problem relating to quality, like, for example, setting up a mechanism for evaluating the PhD program, or evaluating knowledge exchange programs, or whatever it might happen to be. So this is the quality program. It's as Locke said at the beginning, it's end on to the leading Catholic universities, and it's one, I think, which we do look at as being a really key one, and it's key as an issue because of the importance which is now set on quality assurance in the increasingly competitive environment which Catholic higher educations happen to be in. If the quality and our perceived quality isn't up to it, then obviously we've got difficulties in terms of student recruitment, sustainability, and various other things of this type. Quite apart, of course, from delivering the service to the community which Catholic universities should be delivering. So in a nutshell, that's what the quality program is all about. And over to David for a summary.
Thank you very much, John. Pulling all this together, what would we want you to take away about these programs? John said at the start they were different, and they certainly are, and they've been evolving over the years. The first thing to say is that they're focused on your university and you, and where you are at the moment, and where you want your university and your team to go. Now, we have had universities that have taken the view that this program actually helps them to build leadership capacity. And they've either sent 2 or 3 people at the same time, and they have worked together on projects during the program, which we've been able to adjust the program to accommodate. Or some universities have sent their new rector 1 year, and then next year they've sent somebody else, and so on. And they continue to refresh the development of their leadership capacity in that way. The big point is that it's focused on your university, you, and your issues. It is not following some syllabus that we think might be right for you. Secondly, it is an investment. It's an investment in terms of your time, and it's an investment in terms of cost, although relative to other leadership programs around, this one is not expensive. We talk about big impact. There are some issues which have to be dealt with now. If we were doing this program at the early stages of COVID, then it would have been very different. It would have been very focused on that. But as we come out of COVID, there are going to be issues about what we have learned, what we might do better, and so on. And we will focus on those as immediate issues. But one of the great things about working in the higher education sector is that it's been around for eons, and it's continually adapted itself and so on. And universities are generally strong because they do think about the future. And this program will think about how to get there strategically. As far as we know, this program is unique in Catholic higher education. We've had lots of nice feedback from people who've been on it, but I think it was this bit of feedback which, for me, summed up what it is we try to do. One of the best combinations of management frameworks, action and case studies in the setting of Catholic universities culture. You don't usually find those elements together. Well, we engineer the program so that they are together and so that you will all benefit from it. We'll have fun as well. You'll see some great places. And there are the details of the quality program and the Leading Catholic Universities program. They're on the website as well.